I'm 22 and I fucking love cartoons, dude! I'm Mike Dangerous, and this is Talking Shots.
Sword sheath, it's the return of the blade and slice shade, getting paid until my silhouette fades. A mercenary, spit till every verse is scary sage, doing girlies dirty, splitting with obituaries. Death is not a factor, more than just a rapper packing hash up in the stash. Mine faster than
With any art form, there will be artists who push the boundaries of their craft. They will tell stories that challenge and explore different points of view, whether they be religious, societal, or whatever the case may be. There will always be artists pushing the boundaries for those who want more than a surface level understanding of the world around them. The Japanese found a way to do that with titties and giant robots. Let me back up a bit here. The East and West have historically viewed animation differently. Animation really wouldn't appear in Japan until around World War II, mainly as propaganda pieces. Stateside, we would see the two animation juggernauts, Disney and Warner Brothers, dropping family-friendly hits like Snow White, Alice in Wonderland, and a slew of slapstick cartoons like Bugs Bunny. Mine is the one time Donald Duck was a Nazi, but like we don't talk about that here. It was this period that would go on to influence the majority of Eastern animation. Japan would go on to emulate that family-friendly style of animation with films like Kimber the White Lion, Astro Boy, and Speed Racer. Some of these would even be picked up and translated, albeit poorly, and shown to Western audiences. Interestingly enough, Kimber the White Lion would go on to be the biggest influence for The Lion King. However, as these children aged, so did their animation. With a quickly growing and changing Japan and the mid-70s nearing, we would see shows like Gundam and Macross, which of course featured giant fucking robots, but of course had a much more political and mature tone that a much older audience would get behind. It was around this time as well that we would see the first animated hentai starting to pop up. You see, Japan's no stranger to sexy times. This is where we really see a divergence in Eastern and Western culture. The 70s gave birth to a sexploitation movement, however, in the West was relegated mostly to underground films or horror movies. Rarely was it ever seen in animation, at least in the West. Most animated sexploitation films came out of Italy, Belgium, Germany, and you guessed it, Land of the Rising Sun. That's not to say Western animation wasn't getting more suggestive in its themes. Pink Floyd's The Wall is a good example of this, but you didn't see it as often. This would lead into the 80s with the Japanese animation boom. As animation would increase in popularity, so would the size and scope of projects. It was around this time that we would see the rise of Studio Ghibli. What Ghibli showed us was that animation could be beautiful and it could be taken seriously. With budgets and creative liberties on the rise, we would see much more ambitious works like Mamoru Oshii's Angel's Egg in 1985. Up until that point, we hadn't seen anything that abstract done before with that level of production. Meanwhile, in the US, we had legends like Don Bluth dropping hits like Land Before Time and All Dogs Go to Heaven, all of which made me cry, which pushed the boundaries of what could be done with children's entertainment. However, the stigma that these were made for children remained. Television didn't fare much better, with most TV shows existing to sell toys, or pizza, or musicals.
But pizza power, applying sauce of food delight.
What the fuck? As the 80s came to an end, and movies like Akira costing 1.1 billion yen to produce, we would see a lull in animation coming from Japan around this period, as the bar was set too high and anime wasn't making as much money as it did. Ghibli was one of the few studios to be producing works consistently throughout this period. It was in this lull that we would see a lot of American studios popping up and producing for Western audiences. Nickelodeon, Cartoon Network, and on the film side, Pixar would drop content that would be more than just mobiles for selling toys. Nickelodeon was dropping shows like Ren and Stimpy, Hey Arnold, Rocko's Modern Life, all of which brought a wit and creativity that was severely lacking, at least on television at that time. It was around this time that we would begin to see animation aimed at older audiences, with shows like The Simpsons, Daria, and Beavis and Butthead. The stigma that animation was only for kids was starting to fade. Pixar, of course, would change the way that we see animation forever, and some consider it to be the nail in the coffin for traditional hand-drawn animation. While the US would see leaps and bounds in filmmaking technologies, Japan was still suffering from its lack of animation sales. However, in 1995, Mamoru Oshii would return and drop arguably one of the most important films to animation to date, Ghost in the Shell. Taking heavy inspiration from Blade Runner, Ghost in the Shell asked what it meant to be human in a world where you could replace every single part of your body with a machine. A person's conscience or ghost could be copied, pasted, and even modified. This movie would not only go on to inspire the Matrix movies, but would also play a big part in bringing anime to the West. The following year, Disney would acquire the distribution rights to Ghibli films, and ironically enough, release a version of Pocahontas that was actually good. Around this time, we would see shows like Evangelion drop, which would bring it back to a time when fighting shit and giant robots was prime, but take it back to a much deeper, personal territory. It's the late 90s. Anime is growing in popularity in the West. Cartoon Network's Toonami and Adult Swim blocks would introduce Americans to mature anime, and the glory that is Steve Bloom.
When you were a kid, you specialized in dreams.
From there, the floodgates would open. With Western animation stepping up its game and Eastern animation making its way to the West, we would see a plethora of great content from either side. Shows like Fooly Cooly, Death Note, Bleach, all gaining popularity alongside shows like Invader Zim, Samurai Jack, and even shows heavily influenced by anime like Avatar: The Last Airbender and The Boondocks. Today, anime is more commonplace than ever, and Western animation continues to bring its A-game. Right now, I'm willing to say that we're in one of the best times for animation creatively. If you're younger than me right now, you're gonna grow up remembering this as a very important time for animation. I mean, right now, one of the biggest animes is a fucking show about figure skating, and Cartoon Network has a show about 3 bears stacked on one another. The crazy thing is, they're actually good. So what do you think? What are the shows that got you into anime? What are some of your favorite shows from Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, comment, favorite, subscribe. I'm Mike Dangerous, and this is Talking Shop.